And in this podcast, we're pleased to be joined by Patrick Keeney. He is the CEO of Subeka. Subeka is a company that deals with the Internet of Things, especially in the water space. And so, Patrick, thank you for joining us on WQA Radio.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
You're going to be the keynote speaker at the Major Leadership Conference Luncheon. We're so glad to be talking to you about this and to get kind of a preview, if you will, of what you're going to be talking about. I know it's disruption, I know it's innovation, and if I guess we have a working title of thinking outside the meter box. So before we dive into what you'll be talking about, give us an update or just kind of an overview of yourself and Subeka.
Sure. For folks out there who may know me, so that they would recognize, for the last number of years, last 3 years, I was the worldwide head of water for Amazon Web Services. So I was focused on bringing cloud technology and emerging technologies to solve water challenges around the world, whatever they may be. Prior to that, for 23 years, I was with the global engineering company Arcadis out of the Netherlands. Various global positions with them, largely around global development, corporate development. Spent 9 years on their governance board. So, and then went on to Amazon Web Services because the way things are going. Technology is just so important, and it's finally making its way into the water industry, right? So, the water industry might be one of the laggards in terms of technology adoption, but that time is here. And along that way, I met a startup that I've worked with for the last 2 years called Subeka, and which was a really interesting IoT company, particularly in the way that they are architected. And we had brought them in on some early product launches that were pretty successful. And so we can talk about this a little bit later, but when Amazon launched the Sidewalk network, which is the world's largest free IoT network, back in April, I had agreed to come over to Subeka as their new CEO. So, taking them from kind of an R&D company into full production. So,
is Subeka then using the Amazon Sidewalk program?
Yes. So Subeka is built on multi-comms. So we have in our devices, we have Bluetooth, the latest Bluetooth 5, and full LoRaWAN functionality. But in addition to that, we have Sidewalk functionality. So the real game changer there for kind of water utilities and water customers is you're able to deploy a sensor or a device into the field and not have to worry about kind of managing a network. And not only do you have to not worry about managing a network, it's also free. So there's no cost. So, your typical, let's take a water meter, right? If that's on something like 5G, that's about 70 cents a month for each meter. So if you're a small utility that has maybe, 20, 30,000 homes, your cell bill, is going to be $250,000 a year. So that's real money to utilities of that size.
Oh, well, I can imagine. I mean, so water bills will either decrease or municipalities and those with the technology will see cost savings one way or the other, right?
Yeah. And when, as folks here on the podcast who are listening know, aging infrastructure is just a massive issue, right? I mean, it's driving so much in the water market today. And so it's not just that the cost savings necessarily go into somebody's pocket, but it frees up that money to do other things that are really necessary.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a way of funding continued innovation, right?
Yeah. So that's real money. That's real cost savings to be able to have kind of free telemetry. And it's not only that. It's what we're really committed to, and the thing that I'm really passionate about. If kind of to know one thing about me is, I think people know that there are about 50,000 water utilities in the United States, very different from the electric market. And so a lot of those utilities are very small and they've been locked out of technology. So being able to bring a really low cost suite of technologies to them where they can connect those devices for free is really, really important. So it's, the big utilities have always had a lot of money to do things, and the smaller ones haven't. So that's one of our real missions.
I should also point out that you and Paulie Undusser, WQA's chief executive officer, were on a panel discussion back in, I think it was December, for the American Water Works Association and talked about technology and innovation, some of these very same things. Can you tell us a little more about that and how that conversation went?
Yeah, sure. So that was a really great opportunity. I was really pleased that David LaFrance, asked me to participate. It was a 3-day workshop on technology innovation in the water market under the guise of Water 2050. What will water look like in 2050? And it was really kind of fascinating to hear all the ideas that people had for not just what's going to happen in the next 3 years, but what's going to happen in 2050. There's a great quote from Jeff Bezos, and I'm not one to always quote Jeff Bezos, but he did have a quote that resonated with me when I was joining Amazon Web Services, and that was, people always ask him, what's going to change in the next 10 years, and his response is always, "So I really don't care what's going to change in the next 10 years. What I care about is what's not going to change in the next 10 years, because those are really stable markets." And that is just what the water market's all about, right? There's going to be the Netflixes of the world will come and go. The Ubers may come and go, but people's need for safe, clean, affordable drinking water, there's no scenario in which that's going to change. So putting that lens on something like what Paulie and I did with AWWA was really great.
And let's fast forward then to September now and your guest appearance at the Mid-Year Leadership Conference, sponsored by the Water Quality Association out in Lake Tahoe. Can't beat that for a setting.
Nope.
What will you be bringing to the table, so to speak, Patrick, to talk about with us?
Well, I think we'll talk a little bit about innovation, right? How does innovation happen, not just inside your company, but also how are you able to bring innovation to a market that may be resisting innovation, right? Because there are people who, a lot of people who, have been around the water market for a long time. I mean, this is not a market that changes quickly, and so how do you drive innovation in the face of that? So a lot of my discussion will be around innovation, and I'm also one, interestingly enough, having come from, I think this will be part of the message, is that interesting for me coming from AWS. There's a lot of noise in the market about artificial intelligence and a lot of this digital transformation and a lot of this stuff. And I think for the water market that may be a little bit off point. What technology should, really is going to be able to do is make things more simple. These solutions that were complicated years and years ago are going to, get easier and just much more simple for a utility or for a homeowner or for anybody with a water challenge to be able to get to that solution. So simplicity in the face of all of this digital noise is probably something it will definitely be part of what I talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think about sensors and things like that, understanding where the water is going or flowing at any one moment. I can imagine that being very subject to technology and changes there. But beyond that, you're putting water through a pipe that goes out a faucet. Is there really much going on that's going to change in the future?
Oh, I certainly think so. I think, point source kind of controls and, point source treatment, treatment systems in the home. Different. Paulie and I talked about all sorts of different ideas. I mean, when in terms of people's health and wellness and the type of, delivery of health and wellness kind of services that you could get through a water system. I think it's there'll be tremendous changes, in things like that.
Let's go to the disruption part of the equation. What do you see being disrupted throughout all of this?
Well, I mean, on the market side, certainly, climate change is a huge disruptor that everybody's going to have to face with. And I don't care where you are in that water cycle, whether you're from if you're dealing with extraction issues all the way through treatment, climate effects, climate changes are there. We're seeing increased storms, which are weighing heavily on our piped infrastructure. Everything to temperature, all sorts of things there. So I think that's a disruptor, right? And then I think that the technology, there's various technologies out there that will be disruptors. And even though I just commented, like AI will, some of this stuff is a little bit, there's a little bit of noise to it. If you do look at it, there are a lot of benefits from machine learning, and kind of a step down from maybe an AI light, but also the stuff that we're talking about. I mean, who would have envisioned a day where you had a free IoT network that covered 93% of the U.S. population? That's not too bad because and that type of thing will happen. I think communications will get better, and I say cheaper, but I almost mean free. I mean, you're going to be looking at satellite telemetry that's by 2050 is just really going to change the way we do things.
Yeah, and I think about our dealers and our manufacturers trying to get their hands around the future. Is it one of those things, Patrick, where if you can kind of envision a need or a solution out there, even though it's not technically possible right now, that maybe sort of in a sci-fi way, eventually it will be?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because sometimes you envision things. You say, well, if I could do this, right? And then when you think that it's impossible, but when you go out and you then look for that solution, it's there. I mean, some of the wireless, some of the battery-free sensor technology, it was one of the things that I talked about with Pauly, that's out there right now. So these are sensors that you can say put in your home or you can put anywhere that don't have batteries in them. And what they do is they harvest Bluetooth energy from the ambient air. So there's a little sticker that looks like a postage stamp and it's got a little wire on it. And it just collects these vibrating electrons and will wake up a little tiny micro CPU and send a signal. So when you start thinking about the way that some of that technology is moving, and it opens a lot of doors to a whole lot of things.
Yeah, it's just sort of envisioning the potential out there. And it reminds me of also my favorite Henry Ford quote, where he says, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah, I know.
So you have to go beyond the thinking that's within your own box. And again, going back to the title of your talk, thinking outside the meter box is what we're talking about. So what would you say your big takeaways will be for the audience at midyear? And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, "Oh, Patrick sounds fantastic. I've got to hear this," and I want to know more about how I can come to Lake Tahoe for the Midyear Leadership Conference, just go to wqa.org/MYLC. That's for Midyear Leadership Conference. You can see all the information and get signed up, and would love to have you, because this is one of those, Patrick, this is one of those interactive, collaborative kinds of conferences where we're looking for really good discussion on a lot of these topics. And so, your presence is going to be, I think, just an excellent addition this year. So, but anyway, I digress. Your takeaways that you want our group.
Yeah, sure. I certainly hope it's interactive. So I don't really know what some of those takeaways would be, because I don't know what some of the questions will be. I think the takeaways I hope to leave people with is kind of an interesting sense of how innovation happens and how to manage disruption, not only internally within your organization, but externally in the market, particularly in this, in the water market. Kind of topics around like data has gravity, how do you manage data, and how are you going to be able to use this data in the future to for market advantage for yourself and those sorts of things. But I do hope that there's there's a lot of questions and a lot of kind of back and forth, because that's really where things get interesting. I can get up and give you my perspective, but once people start throwing their 2 cents in, those conversations get really rich. And if you do want to see how the sidewalk network actually works, it's right on our website. You can put in the smallest little town in the United States and see what kind of coverage is there. It really will blow your mind.
Oh, fantastic. Subeka.com. All right, Patrick Keeney, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.